Excellent, thank you, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon or good late morning if you're on the West Coast. I'm Peter Banwell, Senior Manager at Energy Star. I manage the EV charger program as well as managing the sales and marketing team here at Energy Star for a number of different product categories. And I think we've got a pretty good group pulled together here. We have the Energy Star perspective on sort of where we are with the program. And then we've got two excellent guest speakers, Mike Fogarty from ChargePoint and Mike Sanford from Verizon. Let me introduce Mike Fogarty first. After a 25-year career in the semiconductor space, Mike joined ChargePoint 2 years ago as the Senior Director for National Accounts. He leads a team that supports a number of the key vertical markets, including automotive, commercial, real estate, multifamily, retail, hospitality, fueling, and convenience. So that's Mike Fogarty, ChargePoint. They're a EV charger manufacturer. And then Mike Sanford is going to follow him. Mike is from Verizon. He has a background in nuclear and solar power generation, and is currently helping Verizon meet a variety of sustainability objectives. In addition to promoting renewable energy use and energy efficiency around the company, he's responsible for meeting Verizon's goal of 75 locations with EV charging infrastructure installed by 2020. Mike has a master's in mechanical engineering and an MBA from MIT. So that is our panel. So let me start out, and I will give the Energy Star perspective and then turn it over to ChargePoint. All right, so let's start out with some basics, just to frame the issue, just to get an overview of the technology. So here's the basic idea. So looking at the top level, you see a plug-in electric hybrid. It might go 10 to 15 miles in the all-electric mode, and it'll kick over into the gas mode. So it might take, you know, an hour and a half to charge. But they're hybrids. They have full gas engine and full range on, you know, a tank of gas and a charge. It really depends in terms of how much people get out of their electricity. Some people have plug-in hybrids. They might drive 10 miles back and forth to work, and they may almost never use gasoline. Other people have difficulty accessing charging, and they sort of drag their hybrid around with them and try and get by. So it's really up to access to charging to know how much people get out of that technology. But they can take a few more chances. They don't have an all-electric mode. They don't need the charging to get around. Bottom half of this, an all-electric or battery electric vehicle, you know, up to 300 miles, you know, the Tesla, the Nissan, the BMW, the Chevy Bolt, you know, some of the newer models that are all electric. Here you really, really need charging. So either at home or at workplace, those are the two key areas for charging. You depend on the charging, and it's essential. You have to have it. So in terms of trends, I think what we're seeing is the technology is trending towards the all-electric and away from the hybrid as the cost of batteries goes down. All right, next, and then we've got the, you know, sort of what is charging. So level one is really just, it's basically an extension cord that plugs into the wall, a standard outlet, and then you just plug that into your car with a special connector, and you're good to go. Very simple technology, good for a hybrid that might just, you know, go 10, 20 miles. So if you get 5 miles charging per hour, you go to work for 8 hours, you're fully charged. So you get home and you're set. Level two is where charging starts to get serious, and that's where you really need a level two if you're going to have an all-electric car, a battery electric car. You need 10 or 20 miles of charging per hour. They're not heavy duty, but they're at least 240 volt, 30 amp or higher. So this is the equivalent to an electric dryer, really, and you can use an electric dryer plug if you have one near your garage to plug in your EV charger, and you're good to go. So that's sort of the middle technology, and then DC fast charging is next. This is a very sort of a bigger, much more industrial product. It's they're very expensive, on the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars. They are huge energy users, and those are the ones where whoever it is that's charging needs to have the charging right then, right now. It's usually more expensive. It's a little harder to find, and it's just a much more serious commitment to the charging experience. This is what Tesla has installed around the country. I think they have about 13,000 of them. So they have done an incredible job paying for and building out the infrastructure. Other entities, utilities, states, counties, Electrify America, state governments, they're all filling in the gaps to build out this DC fast infrastructure charging. And you'll see there are a number of connectors there. And that is a little bit of an issue. It's not a major issue, but it's a little bit of an issue. There really should be, ideally there would be just one. So let's move forward. So what are the market indicators? What are we seeing? What do we see at EPA? Why are we in this? Is this going to go away like it did 20 years ago, or is this here to stay? I think we're fully convinced it's here to stay. The reason we got into the marketplaces was because we saw potential large energy users, the chargers themselves, where there was no efficiency metric. There was no way to tell what was good, what was bad. So we thought we'd get into the space and start to direct things towards energy efficiency. As you can see on the left, studies are showing that up to 19 million EVs will be on the road by 2030, starting with around 2 right now. So that number is going to go up abruptly. And then in terms of the infrastructure, we'll need 9.5 million charging ports to support those cars that are out there. So from our perspective, we don't want 9.5 million inefficient chargers out there, and 5, 10 years from now, people say, well, why aren't they efficient? Well, no one was paying attention. So we're in the space now, and we're trying to direct where things are going. The other thing to look at on the right side of this is, this whole issue of DC fast charging, I think, gives you a good perspective here. You'll see that only 1%, about 100,000 charging ports, will cover the country in 2030 versus 9.5 million charge ports that are going to be needed in other places, mostly at home and at work. And that's why we're having, really talking today about building ownership and charging in commercial buildings. So how efficient are they? Where's the opportunity? Here's level 2. So this is the 240 volts, 15 to 40 amp breaker. So the level 2 chargers are efficient, quite efficient on their own. They're about 98% efficient. Where we found the opportunity for good energy savings, or real energy savings opportunity, was in some of the other modes. So not the charge mode, but this graph shows power on the left, so power in watts on the left, and then what it does is so each little increment, each color increment shows a power using mode for the charger. So the base allowance is simply a charging. The yellow is if you have charging with Wi-Fi. The red is if you have cellular, and then there's one more. So the idea is that there are different features that use different amounts of energy, and we wanted to build in some capabilities around all of those different modes. So we're not going to say you can't have Wi-Fi. It has to be this simple base unit because they're more efficient. So we build that into the specification. And then the little tick marks you'll see are actual measurements of energy use for 32 different models. So when we started our research, we saw that the standby power ranged between 20 watts and 2 watts, so a factor of 10. And the reason was, I stated before, no one was paying attention, no one really cared. The manufacturers could, save a few dollars by using, cheaper components. And it really wasn't a big deal. And I think what we saw was, we don't want 20 watts 24/7 on 9.5 million units and then realized that, that's a ton of energy we're wasting. So we've been working with industry since then to really get the energy use down and to the left, closer to the 2 watts. All right, so the specification today, where we are right now, we've got the AC level 1, AC level 2, and then the dual input. The key features, usually it's just all energy savings, and that's here too. So energy savings, 40% savings in standby mode, which is significant. But the other 2 key components are, first one is safety. Unfortunately, industry came to us in the beginning and said, hey, you need to require safety testing. And we were pretty surprised, and they said, you can buy these online and they're not safety certified, and yes, you can still buy them online today and they're not safety certified. So if you have any control, anybody out there has any control over what's being purchased, do not let people just go online and buy products. You need to have a list and you need to vet the list. And if you use Energy Star, we've already done that, but safety is built into what we do, and otherwise it's kind of the Wild West, unfortunately. Potentially very bad for the industry, potentially dangerous. We don't want it to happen. So make sure you do due diligence on any procurement or sourcing that you do. The third one is open communications. So, being the federal government, we want to make sure that there's, we don't end up with orphan technology or things that don't work 3 years from now because a new technology comes along. So open standards wherever possible. And then the grid communications detail on the bottom, open access, consumer override, some of those features. Here are some of the partners. You'll look at it and say, who? These are companies that are really just getting going. It's not, GE used to be in the business, Siemens is in the business a little bit, but really the companies they're new. They're software companies, they're electronics companies, they're startups. They're very innovative. Most of these, I think everybody here is US based, at least headquarters. And they're great new up and coming companies, and these are just some of the partners that we're working with right now. So what we're doing on the marketing side, really working with partners to get the label out there. Industry media, we're doing trade articles so that the trade knows what we're doing. Conferences and webinars, so EV roadmap for anybody who goes to that, and then webinars such as this one right now. And then we're doing materials development in terms of sector by sector. We're putting together 1 or 2 pages on how-to. We've got a how-to for commercial buildings, how-to for green power, and how-to for homes, like how to get it ready. How do you get your home ready? If you're a builder for an EV charger, how do you get your commercial building ready? What are the steps? We'll hear more on that from the next 2 presenters, but we've got some of the materials ourselves. Partnerships and collaboration, so we're working with states. California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Project, and a mouthful of an acronym, CAL VEVIP, CAL EVBAIP, there we go, and then NYSERDA in New York State. So they are requiring Energy Star for their procurements. And then we're working with a number of other utilities along the same lines. Oklahoma Power, PG&E, Excel, Potomac Gas and BG&E, Pennsylvania DEP. So we're working with them all. They're not all specifying Energy Star right now. Some of them are suggesting it. Some of them are saying it's coming soon. A lot of these procurements take time, but we've got some good partnerships and growing participation with us. So the version 1.1 specification in real terms is the DC fast charging. And what we're looking at there, I mentioned the level 2. There wasn't a big window for active charging efficiency. Well, there is for DC fast charge, because you've got the rectifier that converts from AC to DC, and that's where a number of the losses are. And then the DC charging going into the car. So there's a range. There's about a 10% range, and if you're a 300 kilowatt charger, that's 30 kilowatts floating around that can be captured through energy efficiency. And then minimizing heating and cooling. Some of these units, you know, they get very hot, or they're designed to operate in Canada and Mexico. So they have huge temperature ranges. So we want to minimize heating and cooling. And then standby losses, similar to some of the other product categories we have. So we're in the process of finishing up that specification now. We're getting our final test method out, and then we'll be setting the levels and proceeding next year. Here's a little bit more information on everything Energy Star. So we've got the qualified product list, company list, and then the list of models. We update that whenever we get new submissions. So it's basically whatever you see is the most updated list all the time. And then in terms of what you can do, you know, really we would recommend, you know, talk with your buildings representative at Energy Star, and then just work with us to incorporate Energy Star into your procurement, so you get the energy savings, you get the safety, and you get the, you know, open standards. There's contact for me. I'm Peter Banwell. Stacy Noblett is with ICF International, helping support us on the technical and outreach side. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike Fogarty from ChargePoint. Thanks very much.
Cool, thanks, Peter. Appreciate it. So Mike Fogarty, I'm the Senior Director for National Accounts at ChargePoint. Super excited to be here. At ChargePoint, you know, we wanted to partner with Energy Star early on. We wanted this to be the industry standard for EV charging. ChargePoint was actually the very first EV charging station that did receive Energy Star certification, so very proud of that. And what it means for the commercial entities that we work with is that while we're in the business of dispensing energy, electrons into cars, we're saving site owners on electricity costs while these stations are sitting at idle, given that Energy Star certification. So really proud of that. As part of my role at ChargePoint, I oversee all of North America's automotive relationships, and I won't go through all of the details in this slide, but given the interaction that we have with both the North America automotive OEMs and worldwide, I can just assure you that the industry is going all in on electric. And I think Peter did a great job explaining the difference between battery electric vehicles, which are BEVs, and then the hybrid electric, which has battery packs plus an internal combustion engine. I'll point out only two on the slide. GM, for example, 20 all electric cars by 2023. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, 50% of Volvo cars' volumes to be fully electrified by 2025. They've said flat out they will not make an internal combustion engine car only, though, from this point going forward. It will either be all battery or a hybrid. So there's a really unique change going on in the industry. So what this is showing us is more cars, more drivers. This is a near-term view, and what we're seeing over the last couple of years as far as the number of vehicle sales in the U.S., about a 40% year-on-year growth. This source comes from EV volumes. We like to use external sources, not ChargePoint material. And this is in an auto industry that has actually hit its peak, according to many studies, as far as number of vehicles being sold. So the fact that you're seeing immense growth in the electric industry year on year is a true sign that this is an irreversible trend. Kind of looking at a longer term view, and I don't want to get into 2040 because that's a long, long time out, but I want to point out something that I think is really important here. There's a key inflection point in 2025 where you see the number of vehicles going from 3% to 11%. That really coincides with the bulk of the models that we had shown on that previous slide that they're now fully launched in the market. And that's going to scale from your entry level to the mid-range to luxury brands in every make and body style that you could possibly think of. So all the gaps are going to be filled in. And I think that's what's really missing today from having EV adoption take the next step that it will once these models hit the market. When we talk about commercial, a big focus for us at ChargePoint is on workplace. It's a huge component for commercial. It's a high growth market. It's certainly increasing with demand from both employers who are looking to retain employees. It's a valuable amenity for them, and from the employees themselves who really need this charge to finish their daily commute. So today we have over 4,000 businesses in the U.S. that have incorporated EV charging. ChargePoint as a whole has over 500,000 EV drivers as part of our registered on our app. And in the workplace itself, we're seeing 50% year-on-year growth. So if you recall the slide that said 40, workplaces is actually outpacing the sales for the EV sales in the workplace itself. So a lot of adoption in workplace, and over 40%, and it's growing, of the Fortune 500 companies are adopting EV charging. We expect that number to quickly increase. So this says employees want to charge at work. In some cases, it's not a want, it's an absolute need. It's the second most frequently used charging location. So 80 to 90%, Peter touched on this, it was a great point, 80 to 90% of charging is done at home or work. And ChargePoint has a decade of data because we're a network service company, so we know where folks are charging, we see profiles. The fact that some folks, if you look at the very last bullet on this slide, they may not have home charging. They may be in a multifamily, they may be in a condo, they may be in an apartment. They just may not have that potential to do charging at home. So having a commercial workplace charging for them is absolutely critical to actually finish their daily commute. So moving on, just talking about sustainability initiatives. So many commercial developments will have sustainability initiatives, and EV charging is often a part of that, and it certainly can extend beyond the building. If you look at the first two bullets on this slide, each EV driver contributes 0.5 to 0.75 metric tons of CO2 reductions per year. So on average, a company at scale can reduce their total emissions by 3%, which is an impressive amount. And as EVs continue to proliferate through the market, that number will do nothing but increase. The third bullet, obviously, we're super proud of our Energy Star products. And we take that one step further. We offer very advanced power management features. So this is important for you guys when relative to power to have options. And options can be such things as power share. So when you're bringing a circuit out, and I think Peter talked about a 30 amp or 40 amp circuit that would come out from a panel to a unit, that can actually be split to serve two stations. It will offer a slower charge during that time, but it's one methodology of power management. Another one is actually setting physical limitations on how much power the main power source will deliver to all of the stations. So if you have 10 stations and 8 of them are plugged in and you're at that maximum, once station number 9 plugs in, they just peanut butter that available power to the 9 stations. When the 10th person plugs in, that continues. So having stations that offer flexibility from Energy Star to advanced power management capabilities really then help your sustainability initiatives. Okay, planning. So there are multiple facets to consider before you start EV charging. The best time, frankly, is new construction, or if you're making improvements to your electrical infrastructure or to your parking lot, because that means you're pulling permits, there's open ground, there's obviously cost savings. So when we look at the very left first segment where it talks about cost differences, there's savings there. Now, that's not to say you can't do it post. We do a ton of retrofit. It's probably 70% or 80% of the stations we put in are actually buildings in existence, and they will do completely new trenching. We can do a sub panel. We'll look at the electrical capacity, and that's what all these blocks are. So on the first one, location is important. So when we talk about location, it's trying to position the stations as closely as possible to the proximity of power. And the reason for that is whenever you're running these stations, you need to do trenching. And trenching through softscape, meaning landscape, is less expensive. Trenching through asphalt or concrete is obviously more expensive. So the closer you can get those stations and limit the trenching costs along with the conduit and the wire is advantageous. There's a lot of compliance and regulations out there. There are numerous ZEV states. I believe it's zero, and ZEV stands for zero emission vehicles. So they have policies in these states that are actually mandating a certain number of parking spots to be allocated to have that make ready, that piece that I just talked about with the conduit run 2 spots, even if you're not putting in EV chargers. So we do have policy teams at ChargePoint that can help give you guidelines as far as what's required given what you're trying to do. Utility is an important piece of this as well. So the utility can tell you, hey, do you have enough power to add EV charging to your location, or do you need another service drop? That's probably rare for the level 2 that you would need a service drop, but it may be extremely likely if we're talking about the DC fast charge that Peter talked about. So those are also important considerations. Then you get into electrical distribution and ChargePoint. If we can find good electrical contracting partners, and we have a network of hundreds of certified ChargePoint electrical contractors that know this space and can help ensure that you have proper panel capacity in your electrical room and help you on the ideal site location for the chargers, given some of those things I talked about with the make ready. The final aspect is really the permitting piece of it. And it's not just permitting, it's planning. And I'm giving an example of where things just went completely awry. So we had a commercial entity that built a brand new garage, and they planned for EV charging, and they permitted for all of this. They put the power stations in the set locations as part of their plan. They went and striped the garage. Unfortunately, where the striping was, these stations that normally have two cords to service a spot to the left and the spot to the right, the stations were dead center of the parking spot, meaning that it could only service one car despite having two nozzles to support two cars. So really what all of this is, this whole plan ahead is, it's talk with your electrical contractors, talk with us as experts or different service providers should you choose somebody else, to make sure that you align all of these critical aspects to get it right up front to save money and not run into pitfalls down the road. Okay, now we're going to look at the driver experience, and I touched on this a little bit earlier. So for a lot of drivers, this is not an amenity. This is required infrastructure for them to commute, or an electric fleet, for example, to operate in an environment. And we offer network stations that allow you to really customize the best driver experience. So we can look at driver groups, define your employees, define guests, contractors, et cetera, and then tailor policies, smart policies to those folks. Who do you want to grant access rights to? Do you want them to be available to the public? Do you want it just to be employees? Do you want employees to have free charging, or do you want to charge for charging? Do you want to have special features like waitlist, where this is kind of like the Applebee's queue that you get where, hey, I'm waiting for my table while I'm waiting for my parking spot. I get a notice on the app saying it's available. That station is then being held. There's on the screen it says the station is reserved, so it's not like the mall at the holidays where somebody can swoop in and steal that spot. It's these intelligent policies that really help tailor the experience for the folks that you're trying to serve. The last piece of it is creating a great user environment, a user experience. So for apps that we have on Apple or Android, you can see not only the workplace stations maybe that you visit every day, but you can see the retail, the hospitality, the about town spaces, all in one app, one account. So that's really critical. And then the last piece I'd say is for folks that have not added EV charging before, one of the things that we are very cognizant of is the fact that you're going to be looking to us as content experts. We've done this for 10 years, so we will get on the phone with each individual new customer and sit for 45 minutes to walk through and implement the very best policy for you as a new station owner that meets your needs as a station owner and your driver needs. And we have a lot of guidelines to help along those lines. Okay, let's look at the driver experience. Peter covered this, so I don't want to get too much into it, but as noted, level 2 gets you about 25 miles of range per hour. That's a 208 to 240 source with a 30 amp or a 40 amp circuit. But what I want you to think about for level 2 is this is ideal for commercial. This is where we see 90% of commercial going today. It's 2 to 3 hours of charging. And for those who are not EV drivers, I want to kind of paint this picture in your mind that this is the cell phone mentality when you own an EV. When you have a cell phone, you don't wait for it to get down to 2% before you go and plug it in. Normal traditional gas cars, you get down to about a quarter of a tank, you start thinking about in the next 50 miles, I'm going to need to fill up. For EV drivers, it's the constant top off. And that's why level 2, where you have this possibility of charging at work, is the perfect environment. Level 3 is there. It's normally done more on the corridor, the long runs. We are working on the Appendix D money, which is going to be available for every state. We are building a network of DC corridors across the U.S. so folks can travel coast to coast as well. But this is more for if you're going to put it in the commercial space, it's more for the unplanned events. It's somebody has an emergency, need to get home, have not yet charged. They can get 15 minutes of a quick charge and make their 30, 40-mile commute to take care of the emergency. or there's a critical appointment for a business meeting outside the office, person hasn't charged, same type of experience for them. You may chuckle that says it pairs well with valet services. There are large companies that do actually have a valet person that they'll install these DC fast chargers, they'll charge them fully, and they'll move them to a standard parking spot. But it's also good for retail, hospitality, where they do have attendants that can cycle these things through. Because to the last bullet, you don't want these stations sitting idle. You want these should be high turnover stations because of the rapid nature that they go and charge with. Okay, let's look at resources and ways to reduce cost. What you're seeing here on this slide is really the entire journey from the utility distribution network to the transformer, to the meter, the panel. Then that panel would actually sit inside your electrical room typically, and then the EV charger, which is charging the vehicle. For the vast majority of commercial installations, and again, this is more focused on level 2, it's the panel to the EV charger portion that we talk about the make-ready requirements. So that panel would need a 208, 240 volts power supply, and it would need a 30 or 40 amp circuit. As long as that's available, all the trenching and other aspects of this can be done. And we'll talk about ways to mitigate costs a little bit further on in this. So for new construction, as noted, we have 10 years of experience doing this, so we know costs. It's $500 to $900 per parking space for new construction. In post-construction, you're looking at $2,500 to $4,500 investment per parking space. So again, 5x more than pre-construction. However, if you recall, if you're doing any work on the electrical room or any work on the parking lot, this is a perfect opportunity because you're going to have permits pulled, you're going to have building folks coming in, contractors, et cetera. So this is the perfect time to look at. Even if you do not have that, we still have ways of getting chargers in, and we're going to talk about that more. Okay, so for new construction, just a couple of guidelines to think about. In these ZEV states that we talked about before, the zero emission vehicle states, they have guidelines. They'll say, hey, it should be 10%. Some municipalities in California have mandated 20% of the spots need to be EV make ready. So just build for the future, whether it's new construction or post-construction. In the post-construction side, really consider the incentives that are out there. And I have a slide coming up on that. They're incredible. There's new incentives coming out basically weekly, so we'll talk about that. And the other one is build for the future. So maybe you only want to add 2 chargers to your commercial environment today, but at $47 per square foot of trenching conduit, stretching that out to 10 spots is a no-brainer versus coming back a year later and then opening the ground up, re-permitting, bringing back in these contractors and spending thousands of dollars for something that would have cost you $500 to prep for in advance. So really, plan for the future is a key consideration here. Okay, so on this slide here, you'll see in orange the states that have clean air incentive policies. And today, there are 69 active EV service equipment programs, both state or utility. In addition to this, the Volkswagen Appendix D money is being rolled out nationwide. So every state will have a portion of that, and it's allocated based on the percentage of those Volkswagens that were in their state. So each state will get a bucket. And in the majority of cases, those buckets are being used to help fund EV infrastructure, either via the DC fast stations on the corridor and or a mix of level 2 stations at commercial facilities. So you can find all of this information at chargepoint.com/incentives. We update this constantly. We have a policy team, a grant team, a utility team that monitor this very closely. So you can pick your state, you can see the programs that are available, and then you can dive deeper into what funding is available for you. Okay, engage us early. So I'm getting toward the end. Ask for help. We're here to help you. We have a lot of experience. We've done this. We have 101,000 plus stations out there. We can help with site planning. We can configure power management. We'll help with the activation pieces, setting up smart policies. We can work on the electrical inspections. We can introduce electrical contractors. We're just a resource for you, and that's the key for the slide. And then there are other resources listed here as well, and I know these presentations will be available for your use as well. I just want to show one last example of where things kind of went astray. So a development on the Potomac in Washington, D.C. This is where I park my yacht that I don't have. Beautiful place. You have 24/7 valet service. You have concierge. You have pet services. You have everything you could possibly want. However, when we go to the details, 373 units, and it's one-to-one parking, so 373 parking spots. The architect specs 6 charging stations, and he spread them out over 3 floors. So the charging ratio is 1 port for every 62 parking spots, and this is in a metro that is widely adopting EVs. It's ridiculously low as far as their needs. They recognize this almost immediately. The problem is also they didn't wire enough power, so they're having to power share and bring these things down. So not only do they have a minimal charging footprint, but even the chargers they have in place can't actually access the full power that the station could provide. So what they're having to do now is go back, add additional electrical capacity, retrench, restripe on every floor. And the lesson learned obviously is pre-planning could have avoided all of this. Now it's costing them time, it's delaying the garage launch, and it's impacting the expectations of the drivers, the folks that have bought these residences, multi-million-dollar residences on the Potomac. So that's one thing we always just try to stress is, plan ahead. And to a very last slide before I turn it back over, it's ask around. We work with a lot of amazing companies. We do see this as an irreversible trend. And I'd say also survey your drivers. Talk to the drivers within your commercial entity and ask them, are you considering an EV for your next purchase? Because AAA has done a recent study saying 1 in 5 drivers are strongly considering buying an EV over their next purchase. So that's it for me for now. I will turn this back over to Peter and then Mike at Verizon.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Mike. That was excellent. So yeah, I guess we're ready to move on with Verizon. And Mike Sanford, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks so much. Peter, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me today. Verizon's really excited about EV charging. I'll get into it, but we've been an early adopter starting since 2011. And I recently came onto the program about a year ago, so it's been a great learning experience for me. As you mentioned early on, I have a background in the utility industry. I've done a lot of sustainability work across the company, and EV charging is definitely one of our big up-and-coming initiatives. So we'll jump right into it. So a little bit of history on our background. Like I said, we started out in 2011, so I'll start with the chart on the right-hand side. I tried to show how EV sales have really exploded since 2011, and Verizon has done our best to keep up with this trend. So we started out with just a handful of stations back in 2011, and we've grown to over 170 stations, and really we're turning on a couple more this week, so this number continues to grow. The program really took off in 2013 with the Workplace Charging Challenge, and then in 2017 we set a goal of installing electric vehicle infrastructure at 75 Verizon locations around the country. And as of today, we have hit 65 sites with hopefully a few more coming on in the next couple of weeks here, and a total of 176 total stations. So we've grown quite rapidly, and it's been quite a ride. So a little bit about if you're looking to start an EV charging program within your company and you have a portfolio, I just wanted to throw this in here to show a little bit how organizationally Verizon handles this. The program is really championed internally by the sustainability team. The sustainability team, they handle a lot of the employee-facing parts of the program. So they handle business as usual program management, all the internal communications, and they also sign folks up for the program internally. From the real estate team, which is the team that I'm part of, we handle all of the new site selection, funding for the stations, coordinating all the technical support. We kind of serve as like a center of excellence or a center of knowledge surrounding issues with the EV charging stations. And then finally, we work with the real estate operations teams in the field on day-to-day technical support, and they also provide installation project management support when we identify new stations. But then, coincidentally, our partner in the industry is ChargePoint, so it's nice that it wasn't another vendor on the call today, but they've been a great partner for us, and really they handle all the technical support, warranty support, platform and payment management. So really, ChargePoint works with every single one of these Verizon groups on a daily basis to keep the stations up and running and to install them, and just making sure that our employees are getting a good experience. So a little bit about how to, some lessons learned on installing new stations. Here's just an overview of our process. First, we have site selection, and then we have installation, and then we're continuously monitoring for expansion. So for site selection, you really try and predict the demand, because you don't want to install stations that aren't going to be used. There's certainly some element of if you build it, they will come, but we want to make sure that if we do build it, they actually do come. So we use basically a mix of geographic location, EV penetration in the area, coupled with Verizon's employee population, and typically we've also found that certain types of employees, like if we're at a tech-focused building, they tend to have a higher adoption of EVs. We do a little bit of surveying work prior to identifying these locations, but so we've been developing this process over the past couple of years and really figuring out what works. We also take requests. We keep a running list of requests and kind of file them into the other sites that go through the normal process of evaluation. And then we've developed a set of standards to say any building with over 500 employees has at least 4 EV charging parking spots, and the number continues to increase as EV penetration grows. But then, as Mike was getting into in the ChargePoint presentation, you really need to ensure feasibility, which is landlord approval, parking lot layout. One of the big ones is electrical capacity. As he alluded to, working with the utilities, you kind of have, you just have to be careful and you have to engage them early on. And then finally, local zoning compliance. For example, one parking lot that we're redoing in Piscataway, New Jersey, they recently came out with an ordinance that for every 50 parking spots, you should have at least 1 EV charging spot. So that really dictated the amount of stations that we had to install. From an installation perspective, you really want to provide a detailed scope of work to your contractor, to your electrical contractor. Solicit multiple bids for the work, because we have a minimum of at least 3 bids that we solicit. They can be all over the place. The difference between a $10,000 installation and a $60,000 installation. So there certainly are some contractors that are much better at and much more experienced at installing electrical charging infrastructure than others. Make sure that you have proper signage and ADA compliance. Depending on the region, I believe in California they have ADA minimums where you have to supply a certain number of handicapped electric vehicle charging stations. So make sure you check that. Make sure you complete there's like a readiness form that the contractor needs to fill out to make sure that everything is installed properly. And then finally, for at least in Verizon's process, ChargePoint actually performs the initial or the final bolt down of the station and turns it on. This is part of their warranty process. And then for expansion, as I mentioned, really just monitor your utilization data and set a threshold for once that utilization increases over, for Verizon, it's around 75%. We look to install EV infrastructure, additional EV infrastructure over the course of the next year. So lessons learned around site selection. The chart here shows all of the Verizon installed locations that we have. As I mentioned, even since I put these slides together, we've turned on a couple more. Sorry for the little bit out-of-date chart here, but as Mike was saying, take advantage of all local state utility incentive programs. These can really reduce the cost of the stations. They can add a little bit of time to the installation, the application for the rebates and making sure that you have all your paperwork in order. It is a little bit cumbersome, but it's certainly worth the effort. Check with your landlord prior to doing anything. It's very important. Check with your utility if you're installing more than just 1 or 2 chargers. Predict demand, as I was mentioning, and add to solar installations. So one of my other projects is 24 megawatts of solar infrastructure around Verizon, and it tells a really great sustainability story to your employees if you compare EV charging with solar infrastructure. Our employees love it. If you're doing a lot of site upgrades from the solar project, it becomes very simple to add EV charging to the scope of work. And as Mike said, if you're adding to additional projects, the marginal cost of installing EVs drops pretty dramatically. For installation lessons learned, as Mike also mentioned, make sure you oversize all conduits and plan for future expansion. This is really important, and it's come in handy for Verizon quite a few times. Even if we think that we're building out for, the foreseeable future, the growth rate of EVs has gone up so much that, we're excited to say that we've had to expand quite a few times. And when we have built in additional capacity to our initial installs, it's made it much, much easier to expand. Make sure your contractors follow all local codes. I think this is the same as just about any other construction project, but do be careful there. Put your EV charging stations right next to your adjacent handicap spots. That's one of the lessons learned for us. Around the company, we always like to include at least one EV/handicap parking spot in all of our installations to ensure that we meet all of Verizon's internal accessibility requirements. Minimize distance to the electrical infrastructure. There is voltage drop. I think don't quote me on this, but it might be 150 feet, anything longer than that, and your voltage drop it can get too dramatic, and you'll need to either upsize the cable going to the station or add a transformer in. So it gets a little bit more expensive if you try to go further than that. And then, again, check for your local ADA requirements. Expansion lessons learned. This one is more just about utilize your existing infrastructure better. It's much less expensive to make sure that your stations are being used properly than it is to install new stations. So this has been quite a learning process for Verizon. The picture here shows that there's 4 vehicles parked in our EV charging stations at Piscataway, New Jersey. None of them are actually charging. So, they are clogging up EV charging parking spots, and it's really just from non-compliance. So really, anytime you have additional parking concerns in the building, this tends to be even more of a problem. So make sure, one of the things that Verizon has done to combat this is that we set a nominal fee. So we charge 60 cents per hour, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it does create some incentive to get out there and move your vehicle when it's done charging. In addition to setting a cap, we have a 5-hour charging limit after that, and you are subject to getting a notification, which eventually, if you get enough notifications, that goes to your supervisor. So there is a disciplinary action that can be taken against you for violating the rules of the program. As I mentioned, just develop a process for enforcement of noncompliance, work with security to get them on board, and make sure that prior to signing up anyone, you get buy-in. So make them sign something that says, I will agree to all the rules. And then really just check for your utilization. If you do see your stations being utilized above 50 to 75% of the time, that generally is a pretty high number. And you're probably going to start getting more requests past that point for EV charging infrastructure. In terms of program management lessons learned, really just communicate, communicate, communicate. Get everyone excited about it. Make sure that employees are aware of the benefits. Make sure that they're aware that it's available. That's a big one. And establish clear roles for the program to make sure that the charging stations really, the goal of that is to make sure that they're being used properly. Make sure that security is on board, promote EV charging along with other green commuting options like bike to work, and really kind of create a whole suite of green commuting options. We found that to be very successful. And then be very thoughtful with your incentives and think through, if you do offer free EV charging, how is that going to make people use the charging station? So, for example, if you use free EV charging, it's going to incentivize people to not move their vehicles when they're done charging. Or if you put the charging stations right near the front door of the building, that almost makes them like a premium charging station or a premium parking spot. So again, you're increasing the incentive to park there if you don't necessarily need to charge. So really thinking through how you structure the program for us has been very important to make sure that we keep costs down and we don't have people unnecessarily clogging up the spots. Trends, I'll breeze through this one because I know we are getting tight on time, but we've really seen a trend of growth. And you can see in the two charts on the right, on the top you have the number of charging sessions. I mean, it's just exploded. We've seen a 37% year-over-year growth. And then on the bottom, the year-over-year station utilization, even though we've been increasing the total number of stations, our utilization has also skyrocketed. We've seen a 20% year-over-year growth in station utilization. It really just increased employee demand, increased requests from different sites around the country, and for whatever reason, we've also seen an average session length increase in about 16 minutes year-over-year. So that might be an indicator of the higher range of vehicles coming on the market today and the need for longer charging sessions. So as a summary of lessons learned, really for Verizon, it's determine a mission for your program. So our mission really is to make EV charging accessible to our employees. It is not necessarily to be the primary source of charging for our employees. So we use that to dictate the number of charging stations that we end up installing. Again, think long-term because it saves you a lot of money in the end, which goes along with leaving room for expansion. Involve multiple organizations. You want to you want to maximize your visibility within the program and make sure that everyone involved, so sustainability, real estate, and then all the employee groups which are in the facilities where you install, make sure that they're engaged and on board with the program. Leverage all your partnerships. So for us, that's ChargePoint, that's the EPA, and that's all of our local utilities. Set public goals. So for us, it was really our big public goal around EV charging was 75 locations by 2020. So that's really driven a lot of our expansion, and it has really improved the accessibility of the stations. And then finally, communicate, communicate, communicate. Really, these are great programs. Employees love them. So make sure that your company is taking credit for it and make sure that it's well known to your employees. So with that, I think I will turn it back over, but you know, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. So I guess, Peter, I'll turn it back over to you.